Hey everybody, I want to do a quick tutorial video on the uses of the subjunctive and also the identifying some of the tenses of the subjunctive that we've learned. So very quickly here, and you're going to answer some questions along the way just to make sure that we get this. We have learned about a half a dozen or so uses of the subjunctive. So just a real quick tour of those, right? The very first one that we learned was the cum clause, and that's pretty easy to spot. It starts with cum, and we know that this is the cum that means when, or it could also mean since or although, but when, because we have this imperfect subjunctive with it. We have a subjunctive verb, right? And here it is imperfect because it uses the infinitive plus the ending there, right? That's how we know that a verb is the imperfect subjunctive. It just takes that infinitive form and then adds the personal ending. The next subjunctive that we learned, this was in stage 25, is indirect questions. And indirect questions are, I wonder why he did this. I see who that is. I told him how to get an A on the test. Or here, the soldiers wanted to find out where the old man was or where the old man hid the jewels. So it starts out with a head verb, right? So here, cognoscere in this example, I wonder, I think, I see, I feel. But then we have an interrogative, a who, what, when, where, why, how, that kind of thing. All right. After that, so I think in stage 26, we learned purpose clauses. And purpose clauses are one of our three clauses, basically, four if you count fear clauses as well. But one of a few clauses that use ut to start out the clause. And a purpose clause is, I went to the store to buy milk. Okay. Or here, I'll stay here to defend the house. The princeps, the emperor sent Pliny out. Actually, let's skip down to this one here. We kept quiet, we were silent, and then ne is the opposite of ut here. So we kept quiet, not to be heard, so that we were not heard by the centurion. So ut and ne there. We also learned a relative clause of purpose. So instead of using ut here, we have a relative pronoun here, qui, which directly relates back to a person. So he sent Pliny away, who would rule the Bithynians, or he sent Pliny away to rule the Bithynians. And this one I think is a little bit tough. Now it's rare. It doesn't come up a lot. It's a little tough because it kind of looks like an indirect question, doesn't it? I mean, it has a QU word, just like we have with who, what, when, where, why, how. But going back to the regular simple purpose clause, we have ut and ne, right? We did A so that B happens, all right? Now, the indirect command is kind of like that, but this time we're using this head verb. Maybe a command verb is the better way to talk about that. So I ordered somebody to do something. I told somebody to do something. I commanded somebody to do something, but also less obvious things like I begged you to do this. I asked you to do this. I urged you. I encouraged you to do this. So we have this sort of commanding head verb thing with ut, and we have the subjunctive clause, right? So here, I warn you or I advise you to obey the laws. The doctor told us, he ordered us not to go in. So again, another ut clause here with ne as the negative, all right? Now the last really frequent subjunctive use is the result clause that uses ut. And this one, remember, this is what I call the yo mama clause, right? So it's got a so word. And so here it's tote, so many. Tom, tallus, ita, seek, tote, adeo is another one of those. Tantus, aum, so great, if I didn't say that one already. But it's got a so word. Something is so something that. The barbarians threw so many spears that. The difference with the result clause, one way that might help, is if you see a sentence that has ne. Well, result doesn't actually use ne. So if you say, I ate so much cake that I could not eat anything else, well, you would just put a known in there. It would be ut, blah, 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 known. So that ut, I could not, known, eat anything else. So ut and ne are with purpose and indirect commands. And then ut is also a result clause. It signals a result clause. But if you want to use a negative, then you just throw the known in there. Okay? We learned fearing clauses. We've seen that before, but we're going to skip it. That's not formally introduced until stage 40. And so that's basically the run of the subjunctive clauses that we've learned. Now, we have these examples here. Let me zoom in just a little bit more. We have these examples. So I want you to tell me what kind of clause both A and B are. Okay, and you can write that in there. Okay, so number one is cum. Hopefully we recognize that. So that's a cum clause. And number two, we're saying, I will persuade the soldiers ut. Now remember, with ut, it's either purpose, result, or indirect command. And here I'm persuading the soldiers to do something. So that must be an indirect command. Okay? Now let's look at D and E. Okay? So tell me what kind of clause we have here in D. Tam benignus est rex ut omnes eum ament. Okay, hopefully we recognized Tom, so, right? So, he is so kind that. So that's a result clause. Now what about E? Scire volo quis. And quis is the word I think we really need to pay attention there. All right, so hopefully we figured out quis is an interrogative word, right? Who. So I want to know who broke the window. And that is an indirect question. The direct question is who broke the window. The indirect is I want to know who broke the window. All right, G. Let's look at that. Domitianus ipse adest ut fablam spectet. All right, now we have an ut, right? So purpose, result, indirect command. If it's a result, there's a so word. I don't see a so word here. Domitian himself is there. Domitian himself is present. If it's an indirect command, it's some kind of commanding head verb. Well, adest just means is there, so it's not that. It must just be a purpose. Domitian is there to watch the play. So it's a purpose clause. What about H? All right, so ut, purpose, result, indirect command. This time our verb is hortatis est. Agricola urged the Britons to do something, right? To learn Roman customs, to adopt Roman customs. So that is another indirect command. He urged them to do something. All right, look at I. Now we're looking at qui, and immediately I'm thinking indirect question. But I think when we see this, the soldiers, or he sent away the soldiers who would dispel or get rid of the crowd. So this is an example of a relative clause of purpose, okay? So we have he sent the soldiers out to drive the crowd back, or who would drive the crowd back. So if you miss any of these, I wouldn't be surprised if it were this one, because it's a little tough, but that is a relative clause of purpose. It is not an indirect question because we don't really have a head verb there, right? It's not he wondered or he asked or something like that. It's that he sent them to do something. He sent those guys who would do something. All right, J, let's look at this one. Now this is kind of new, noom. We saw an example of this in our stage 37 story. And noom is basically the indirect question version of if. So the haruspices, the priests, will try to understand or to learn if the omens are good. So this is an indirect question. The real question is, are the omens good? The indirect question here is they will try to figure out if they are good, whether they are good. All right, let's look at L. And we got ne here, right? So this signals only really a couple things. It could only be a purpose or an indirect command. Remember, result doesn't use ne. So which one is it? And hopefully we put orabimus is the big thing there, right? We will beg or we will ask. And so that sounds very kind of indirect command-ish, right? So we will ask the leader not to kill the prisoners. Terrible sentence, but it is an indirect command. So I hope that helped a little bit. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the verb tenses. So let me get rid of all of this other stuff, and I want to ask you to give me the verb tense, the subjunctive verb tense of an A, audi reset. And remember, this is the subjunctive tense where we have the third principal part plus isem, eses, eset. And hopefully you put pluperfect, because with the pluperfect, now remember, with the third principal part, it's something perfect active, right? It's either perfect active, pluperfect active, or future perfect active. With the subjunctive, we only know the present imperfect, perfect, and pluperfect. And to be honest, we haven't really been formally introduced to the perfect subjunctive yet. So yeah, pluperfect subjunctive, third principal part plus isem, eses, eset. All right, now let's look at B. Par cant. What tense of the subjunctive is it? Now, we know it's not pluperfect, right? Because it's not the third principal part plus isem, eses, eset. It's not that. We only know two other subjunctive tenses, present and imperfect. Okay? Well, imperfect is like pervenire. Okay? It is the infinitive plus the verb ending. So it's not imperfect because this is not the infinitive. This is the present subjunctive. And remember, we learned with the present subjunctive, we beat all giant liars. So first conjugation, second conjugation, third conjugation, third IO, and fourth. So parco parkera is a third conjugation verb, and so A is the vowel for the present subjunctive, parcant. All right, let's try, let's do spectet here, G. What tense of the subjunctive is that? And hopefully you put present subjunctive. Specto spectare is first conjugation, so the subjunctive vowel for the present is E, changes to an E. All right, what about H? Discurrent. Okay, hopefully you put imperfect. We have the infinitive, disco, discere, and then the NT, so imperfect subjunctive. What about I? This is also imperfect subjunctive. Depello, depellera, there's your infinitive with an NT ending. Okay, sint, that's a little tough because it's the verb to be, so it's irregular. Now, hopefully we remember that it is present subjunctive. So sum es est, sumus estis sunt is the present tense, but the subjunctive version is si, sim, cease, sit, simus, situs, sint, si there. Now, K, what about K? Effugiscent, which tense of the subjunctive is that? Okay, that's correct. That is the pluperfect subjunctive. It is the third principal part, effugio, effugere, effugi, plus isem, eses, eset, esemus, esetus, esent. Okay, last one, L, interficiat. And that, a little bit easier to tell because you got that IA, interficio, interficere is third IO conjugation, and so IA is present subjunctive. Okay, good job. I hope that helped everybody. Take care.